The training mat smelled like iron and sweat. Cadet Mara Chen stood barefoot on its worn surface, hands loose at her sides, while Instructor Vek'tar circled her like a predator testing wounded prey. His exoskeleton clicked with each step, chitin armor that had seen 100 worlds and crushed twice as many recruits. The gymnasium lights hummed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the observation deck where 47 cadets watched in silence. Vek'tar stopped 3 paces away and tilted his angular head. "Humans fear pain," he said, his voice a wet rasp that echoed off the metal walls. "It is why you hesitate, why you break." Mara said nothing. She'd learned that silence was its own kind of answer. The Galactic Defense Academy didn't believe in gentle introductions. Mara had learned that her first week when Instructor Vek'tar, a Korthan whose species had conquered 17 systems before joining the Alliance, introduced himself by snapping a steel bar in half with his bare hands. Now, 3 months into advanced combat protocols, she stood across from him during what was supposed to be a demonstration of species-appropriate restraint techniques. The other cadets lined the observation deck in neat rows. Most were off-worlders, tall Avarin with their crystalline eyes, bulky Drexians whose skin could deflect plasma rounds, even a pair of Silith whose telepathic link made them unbeatable in coordinated strikes. Only 6 humans in the entire cohort. Mara was the smallest. Vek'tar gestured toward her with one clawed hand. "Cadet Chen volunteered to assist today's exercise," he announced, though she hadn't volunteered at all. He'd simply pointed at her during morning formation and said, "You, combat pit, noon." She'd nodded and kept eating her breakfast. Now she watched him pace, his amber eyes tracking her posture, her breathing, the tiny shifts in her weight distribution. Korthan could read body language the way humans read text. Every micro-movement telegraphed intent. She'd studied the files. She knew he was looking for fear. "The human nervous system," Vek'tar continued, his voice taking on the lecturer's cadence he used when making a point, "is hypersensitive to damage. Pain signals travel faster in your species than in most sentients. This makes you cautious, weak." A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. One of the Avarin, Lissa, Mara thought her name was, leaned over to whisper something to her partner. Mara kept her gaze on Vek'tar. He moved suddenly, closing the distance in 2 strides. His hand shot out, not fast enough to be a real attack, but fast enough to test her reflexes. Mara stepped back smoothly, angling her body so his reach fell short by inches. He smiled, exposing rows of serrated teeth. "Reflexive avoidance," he said, louder now, playing to the audience. "Hardwired into your survival instinct. You see threat, you retreat. This is why humans require armor, shields, distance weapons." "You cannot endure." Mara's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She'd heard variations of this speech before, from drill sergeants on Earth, from her foster parents who'd never understood why she kept signing up for contact sports, from the academy psychologist who'd questioned whether she had appropriate fear responses. Everyone wanted to tell her what humans could or couldn't handle. Vek'tar circled again. "Today's lesson," he said, "is about pain tolerance, how different species process discomfort, how we train through it." He stopped in front of her, towering a full foot above her 5'4" frame. "Cadet Chen will demonstrate the human threshold." She met his eyes. "Yes, sir. I will strike you," he said, clinical as a surgeon explaining a procedure. "Non-lethal blows, controlled force. You will remain standing as long as you can. When the pain becomes too much, you will yield." "Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He raised his hand, palm open. "First strike, shoulder, brace yourself." Mara didn't brace. Bracing meant tension, and tension meant the impact would rattle through her bones. Instead, she exhaled slowly, letting her muscles go loose, and watched his hand. It came fast. The slap landed on her left shoulder with a crack that echoed through the gym. Her body rocked sideways, feet sliding on the mat, but she kept her footing. The impact site blazed hot, then went numb. She straightened slowly, rolling her shoulder once to test the joint. Still functional. Vek'tar nodded. "Adequate reflexes, but notice she moves away from the strike. She cannot help it." He walked around her, addressing the crowd. "Pain avoidance is autonomic. The body protects itself whether the mind wills it or not." He struck again without warning, a backhanded blow to her ribs. Mara twisted into it, redirecting some of the force, but it still drove the air from her lungs. She sucked in a breath through her teeth, tasting copper. Something had loosened in her chest, probably a bruised rib. She'd had worse. "She grimaces," Vek'tar observed. The facial expression is involuntary. Humans broadcast their pain to potential threats, a dangerous evolutionary trait in combat. Mara focused on a spot on the far wall, a scratch in the paint shaped like a lightning bolt. She'd noticed it her first day here and used it as an anchor during endurance drills. In her head, she counted breaths. 1, 2, 3. The third strike came to her thigh, a knee kick that would have dropped most people. Mara's leg buckled, but she shifted her weight and stayed upright. The muscle had gone rubbery. She could feel the bruise spreading beneath her skin like spilled ink. "Interesting," Vek'tar said, and there was something new in his voice. Curiosity. Most humans yield by now. She didn't respond. Words took energy she needed to keep standing. He hit her twice more in quick succession, once to the lower back, once to her left bicep. The arm went numb immediately, hanging useless at her side. She turned so her good shoulder faced him and waited. "Still standing," Vek'tar said. He sounded almost impressed. Almost. But this proves nothing. Standing is not fighting. Endurance without counteraction is merely stubbornness. Mara's vision had started to blur at the edges, white spots dancing in her peripheral. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She knew the physiology: adrenaline dump, blood pressure spiking, pain receptors screaming for her to run or collapse. Her body wanted her to quit. She thought about the calendar in her locker. 47 days marked off, 13 left until final evaluations, then assignment, then a ship, then space. Then everything she'd promised herself she'd reach since she was 12 years old, and staring up at the stars from the roof of her third foster home, deciding that somewhere up there had to be better than here. "Once more," Vek'tar said, "then we conclude." He pulled back his fist, not a slap this time, but a closed strike. "Controlled," he'd said. She watched the muscles in his arm coil and release. The punch took her in the solar plexus. The world went white, her body folded, knees hitting the mat, hands braced against the floor. She couldn't breathe. The air had turned solid in her lungs. She coughed once, twice, and her vision slowly cleared. Vek'tar stood over her. "You see," he said to the cadets above, "pain wins. It always wins. Humans are no exception." Mara's fingers dug into the mat. She could taste blood where she'd bitten her cheek. Her ribs screamed. Her arm still hung useless. Her thigh throbbed with every heartbeat, but she wasn't done counting breaths. She pressed her good hand flat against the mat and pushed. Her legs shook. The world tilted. She rose slowly, inch by inch, until she stood upright again. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, but she stood. Vek'tar's eyes narrowed. "Cadet Chen," he said slowly, "the demonstration is complete. You may yield." She shook her head once, just once. Silence blanketed the observation deck. Mara could hear her own heartbeat, the slight wheeze in her breathing, the faint hum of the ventilation system cycling recycled air. 47 sets of eyes watched her stand on trembling legs, while Instructor Vek'tar studied her with the cold interest of a scientist examining an unexpected variable. "You wish to continue," he said, not a question. Mara's throat felt like sandpaper, but she managed 2 words. "Yes, sir." Vek'tar's head tilted, the Korthan equivalent of a frown. "This is not bravery, cadet. This is poor tactical judgment. A soldier who cannot recognize when they are defeated becomes a liability to their unit." She said nothing. Words would cost her the air she needed to stay conscious. "Very well." He turned to address the cadets above. "Let us examine the difference between endurance and effectiveness." Cadet Chen believes she can continue. I will demonstrate why belief is irrelevant against superior capability. He moved again, faster this time. A strike to her already damaged ribs made her vision go gray. She staggered but planted her feet. Another blow to her shoulder sent lightning down her numbed arm. She compensated, shifting her stance to protect her weak side. Vek'tar circled, methodical as a clock. "Observe her posture. She favors her right side. Her breathing is shallow, likely a cracked rib. Her left arm is non-functional. She remains standing through willpower alone. But willpower," he struck again, a controlled jab that snapped her head sideways, "cannot defeat physics." Blood filled Mara's mouth. She spat it onto the mat and straightened. In the observation deck, one of the humans, Jake Morrison, built like a linebacker and usually the first to crack a joke during downtime, leaned forward against the railing. "Sir," he called down, his voice tight, "she's proved the point. We get it." Vek'tar didn't even look up. "The point, Cadet Morrison, is not yet proven. Sit down." Jake didn't sit. Neither did the cadet next to him, Yuki Tanaka, small and quick, who'd beaten Mara's record on the obstacle course last week. She gripped the railing, knuckles white. Vek'tar struck again and again. Each blow precise, each one designed not to drop her but to push her closer to the edge. Mara's world had narrowed to a tunnel, the mat beneath her feet, Vek'tar's movements, the scratch on the far wall. She counted breaths between strikes. 1, 2, 3. "Do you know what I find most puzzling about humans?" Vek'tar said conversationally as he paced. "You are a species that conquered your own world through cooperation. Pack hunters, you survived not through strength but through persistence, through outlasting your prey." He stopped in front of her. "Yet here, when cooperation would serve you, when yielding would be the intelligent choice, you persist in isolation, pride masquerading as courage." Mara's legs shook. She could feel her body starting to shut down, the cold numbness spreading from her extremities, the way her vision narrowed and blurred. She knew the signs, knew she had maybe 3 minutes before her nervous system forced a shutdown, but 3 minutes was a long time. "Nothing to say," Vek'tar prompted. "No protest, no plea." She met his eyes, smiled with bloody teeth. "Pain doesn't make decisions, sir." "I do." Something flickered across Vek'tar's face, surprise, maybe, or recalculation. He stepped back, studying her with new intensity. "Is that what you believe, that your will supersedes your physiology?" "Belief isn't the variable, sir. You said so yourself." She coughed, tasted copper again. "Capability is." "You are barely standing. Standing counts." He moved suddenly, a feint toward her injured side. Mara didn't flinch, didn't shift, just watched him with steady eyes and waited. Vek'tar straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. "Interesting," he murmured. In the observation deck, the whispers had started. Mara could hear them, urgent, worried voices cutting through the silence. Someone was arguing with someone else. She thought she heard Yuki's voice, sharp and angry, and Jake's deeper rumble. The Averin cadets had moved closer to the railing, their crystalline eyes fixed on the scene below. Vek'tar raised his hand again. "Last strike," he announced. "Full force. If you remain standing after this, I will concede the lesson to you. If you fall, you yield." "Agreed." Mara nodded once. "Brace yourself, cadet." She didn't brace. Instead, she shifted her weight, angling her body slightly, and focused on the point where his fist would connect. She'd watched him strike her 9 times now. She knew his rhythm, his reach, the tiny tell in his shoulder that preceded each blow. She knew that he pulled his punches despite his talk of full force, because a real full-force Korthan strike would have shattered her collarbone in the first 30 seconds. She also knew that he'd given her a gift without meaning to. He taught her right here, right now, in front of everyone, exactly how he moved. His fist came like a battering ram toward her sternum. Mara moved. She stepped inside his reach instead of away, closing the distance he'd spent 10 minutes creating. Her good arm came up, deflecting his strike with her forearm, not blocking it, just redirecting the force past her body. The impact rattled her bones, but the blow missed center mass. And in that half-second when he was overextended, when his momentum carried him slightly forward, when his guard was open because he'd never expected her to move toward him instead of away, Mara snapped her head forward. The headbutt caught him directly on the jaw. The crack echoed through the gymnasium like a gunshot. Vek'tar staggered. His hand went to his face. When he pulled it away, green-black blood stained his palm. His jaw hung at an angle it hadn't before, not broken completely, but definitely fractured. Mara dropped to her knees, the last of her energy spent. The mat felt cool against her palms. The world tilted and spun, but she kept her eyes open, kept watching him. Vek'tar stood very still. His amber eyes were wide. He touched his jaw again, gentle, and when he spoke his voice came out slurred. "You struck me?" "Yes, sir." Her words barely made sound. "With your head?" "Yes, sir." "That—" He paused, working his jaw carefully. "That is not a regulated combat technique. You said, full force, sir, didn't specify your force only." She smiled again, blood and all. "Humans endure. To strike harder." The observation deck erupted. The medical bay smelled like antiseptic and recycled air. Mara sat on an examination table while Dr. Karis, a Drexian whose 4 arms made multitasking an art form, ran scanners over her torso and muttered in her native language. The words didn't translate cleanly, but Mara caught the general sentiment, profound disapproval mixed with grudging respect. 3 cracked ribs, doctor. Karis said finally, switching to standard. "Extensive soft tissue damage, mild concussion, nerve trauma in your left arm." She set down the scanner and fixed Mara with eyes like gold coins, and a fractured skull, a hairline fracture but a fracture nonetheless. Mara blinked. I fractured my own skull. Headbutting a Korthan will do that. The doctor's voice was dry. Their bone density is 3 times human standard. You're fortunate you didn't crack it wide open. Does this mean I'm off the training rotation, doctor? Karis made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. You're off everything for 2 weeks minimum, possibly 3 depending on how quickly the bone regenerator takes. Your academy career nearly ended today, cadet. Do you understand that? Mara looked down at her hands. They'd cleaned the blood off while she was getting scanned, but she could still feel it under her fingernails. I understand, ma'am. I wonder if you do. The doctor picked up a different instrument, something that looked like a pen crossed with a light wand. Hold still. This will hurt. It did hurt. The bone regenerator sent pins and needles fire through Mara's skull, down her spine, through every injured bone and tissue. She gritted her teeth and counted breaths until it stopped. Dr. Karis stepped back and made notes on her datapad. The fracture will heal cleanly if you follow protocols. The ribs will take longer. The nerve damage. She paused. That concerns me more than the physical trauma. Humans process pain differently than most species, but you seemed almost indifferent to it. That's not normal. I felt everything, Mara said quietly. I just didn't let it decide for me. That, the doctor said, is either wisdom or pathology. I haven't determined which. She set down the datapad. You have visitors. Shall I send them in? Mara nodded. The door slid open and Jake Morrison entered first, followed by Yuki Tanaka and, to Mara's surprise, Lissa, the Avarin cadet who'd been whispering during the demonstration. Jake took one look at Mara and broke into a wide grin. You broke his jaw, he said, voice full of wonder. You actually broke Instructor Vek'tar's jaw with your face. My forehead, Mara corrected, thickest part of the skull. Yuki laughed, a sharp, startled sound. Everyone's talking about it. The whole deck watched the replay 3 times. You're either getting court-martialed or promoted. Probably both, Jake added cheerfully. He dropped into the chair beside the examination table. Seriously though, are you okay? That looked bad. I'm functional. Mara shifted, felt her ribs protest, and decided not to shift again. What happened after? I don't remember much. Lissa spoke up, her voice softer than the others. Instructor Vek'tar dismissed the class. He walked to the medical bay on his own, refused assistance. They had to wire his jaw shut. He'll be out of teaching rotation for at least a week. Great, Mara muttered. So I definitely made him look bad in front of everyone. You made him look wrong, Yuki said. She sat on the edge of the examination table, careful not to jostle Mara. There's a difference. He said humans can't endure. You proved otherwise. That's not embarrassing for him, that's new data. Jake leaned forward. The other instructors are calling an inquiry, not disciplinary, he added quickly, seeing Mara's expression. They want to review the training protocols, figure out if the demonstration was appropriate. It was appropriate, Mara said. He announced it. I agreed. You got beaten for 10 minutes straight, Yuki pointed out. That's not a demonstration, that's hazing. Mara shook her head, then immediately regretted it as pain flared. He was teaching, I learned. What did you learn? Lissa asked. Her crystalline eyes caught the light, refracting it into small rainbows. That pain can be ignored. That pain isn't the threat, not really. Mara chose her words carefully, feeling them out as she spoke. It's your reaction to pain that matters. Vek'tar thinks humans are weak because we feel everything so intensely. But intensity isn't weakness, it's information, and information you can work with. Jake whistled low. That's either really profound or the concussion talking. Could be both, Mara admitted. They talked for another 10 minutes about the inquiry, about the other cadets' reactions, about whether the academy would change its combat protocols. Dr. Karis eventually shooed them out, citing her patient's need for rest, but not before Yuki squeezed Mara's good hand and Jake promised to smuggle her contraband chocolate from the commissary. When they were gone, the room fell quiet again. Mara lay back on the examination table and stared at the ceiling. White panels. Standard military issue. She'd stared at ceilings like this before: hospital rooms, foster homes, the basement where she'd hidden when her second placement family's arguments got loud. She'd learned to count the panels, make patterns from the seams, turn boring white squares into constellations. She'd also learned that silence didn't mean peace. Sometimes it just meant the pause between storms. The door chimed. Mara sat up carefully, expecting Dr. Karas, but instead Instructor Vek'tar entered. His jaw was indeed wired shut, metal filaments crisscrossing his lower face like spider silk. He moved slowly, deliberately, and stopped at the foot of her examination table. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Vek'tar pulled a datapad from his belt and typed with one clawed finger. The device's voice synthesizer spoke in standard. That was exceptional. Mara blinked. "Sir," he typed again, "I have trained 5,000 cadets across 42 years. None have surprised me as you did today. None have demonstrated such precise control of fear." "I didn't control the fear," Mara said. "I just didn't let it run the show." More typing. "Semantics. The result is identical." He paused, considering. "I owe you an apology." "No, sir, you don't." "I do." The synthesizer's flat voice somehow conveyed weight. "I believed I was teaching a lesson about human limitations. Instead, I learned one about my own assumptions. That is humbling." Mara met his amber eyes. Up close, with the adrenaline gone and the pain muted by medication, she could see past his predator's face to something else, something tired, maybe, or worn. He'd fought in wars she'd only read about in history files. He'd lost people. He'd survived when others didn't. He knew about endurance, too. "You taught me something," she said. "You showed me how you move, your patterns. That's valuable data." Vek'tar's eyes crinkled, the Korthan version of a smile. He typed, "Then we both learned. Good, I will see you in 3 weeks, Cadet Chen. We will resume your training." "I'll be ready, sir." He turned to leave, then paused and typed one more message. "For what it is worth, humans do fear pain. But perhaps fear is not the weakness I believed it to be. Perhaps it is the price you pay for feeling everything else." The door slid shut behind him. The Academy's recreation center occupied the station's lower ring, where artificial gravity felt almost Earth-normal and the viewports showed more of the planet below than the void above. Mara had discovered it her second week, a quiet corner near the observation lounge where she could sit with a cup of terrible coffee and watch the clouds drift across the blue-green continents of Tarsus IV. She sat there now, 3 days after the incident, with her ribs wrapped tight and her skull still aching whenever she turned her head too quickly. Dr. Karas had cleared her for light activity, which apparently meant sitting upright and walking short distances without passing out. Progress. The coffee tasted like burnt plastic, but it was hot and caffeinated. She wrapped both hands around the cup and watched a weather system roll across the northern continent, a spiral of white clouds that would dump rain on somebody's afternoon. "Mind if I sit?" Mara looked up. Commander Sarah Reeves stood beside her table, holding her own cup of terrible coffee. She was 50-something, gray-haired, and had the kind of face that suggested she'd seen everything twice and wasn't particularly impressed either time. She'd given the orientation speech on Mara's first day. "The galaxy is vast, hostile, and doesn't care about your feelings. This academy will prepare you anyway." "Of course, Commander." Mara started to stand, but Reeves waved her down. "At ease, Cadet. This isn't official." She sat across from Mara and took a long sip of coffee, grimaced, and set the cup down. "How are you healing?" "Ahead of schedule, ma'am. The regenerators work fast." "Good." Reeves leaned back in her chair. "I've been reviewing the footage from your training session with Instructor Vek'tar. Watched it 4 times, in fact. Very enlightening." Mara's stomach tightened. "Ma'am, if this is about the inquiry, there is no inquiry." Reeves's voice was flat. Vek'tar himself dismissed it. Said the incident was a controlled exercise that went exactly as planned, and any suggestion otherwise was an insult to his teaching methodology. She smiled slightly. "He's a stubborn bastard. I respect that." "Then, why are you here, ma'am?" Reeves picked up her coffee again, turning the cup in her hands. "I wanted to ask you a question off the record. Why didn't you yield?" Mara considered the question. She'd been asking herself the same thing for 3 days. "I don't know if I can explain it properly." "Try. I've spent most of my life being told what I couldn't do," Mara said slowly. "Too small, too weak, too damaged. My first foster family said I'd never make it to high school. My third placement said I'd end up in jail or worse. Every coach, every teacher, every guidance counselor had a list of things I wasn't capable of." She looked down at her coffee. "And maybe they were right about some of it, but if I let them be right about everything, then I'd never get anywhere." Reeves nodded. "So you proved them wrong?" "No, ma'am, I just decided they didn't get to decide for me." Mara met the commander's eyes. Pain is information, fear is information, but neither of them makes the choice. I do, even when the choice is irrational. Is it irrational to want more than what's expected? Reeves was quiet for a moment. Outside the viewport, the storm system had grown, its spiral arms reaching wider across the continent. Did you know, she said finally, that I was the first human to graduate from this academy? Mara blinked. I didn't, ma'am. 28 years ago, the Alliance had just accepted Earth's application and they were debating whether humans should even be allowed in combat roles. Too fragile, they said, too emotional, too prone to panic under pressure. She smiled without humor. My graduating class had 240 cadets. 11 of them were human. 3 of us made it through. What happened to the others? They quit, not because they couldn't handle the training, though the training was brutal, but because they got tired of being told they didn't belong. Tired of being the example, tired of proving themselves every single day to people who'd already decided humans weren't worth the effort. Reeves took another sip of coffee. I almost quit too, twice. Once after a Drexian instructor broke my arm during sparring and told me I was too delicate for military service. Once after I failed my first deep space survival test because I couldn't metabolize the nutrient paste they gave me. What changed your mind? Spite, mostly. Reeves laughed, a short, sharp sound. I decided that if they wanted me gone, they'd have to kick me out. I wasn't giving them the satisfaction of quitting. Her expression softened, but also, I realized I wasn't just doing it for myself. I was doing it for every human who'd come after me, every cadet who'd need an example that humans could succeed here. Mara understood. You were making a path. I was making a possibility, Reeves corrected, and now you're doing the same thing. Whether you meant to or not, she leaned forward. The footage of your session with Vek'tar has circulated through every instructor channel in the academy. They're reevaluating their training protocols. Several alien species are questioning their assumptions about human pain tolerance. You've started a conversation that needed to happen. I just headbutted an instructor, ma'am. You demonstrated resilience under extreme conditions. You showed that human physiology isn't a liability, it's a variable. Reeves smiled. That's worth more than any test score or simulation victory. That's doctrine-changing data. Mara didn't know what to say. She stared at her coffee cup, at the faint lipstick mark on the rim, at her own reflection distorted in the dark liquid. I'm not telling you this to put pressure on you, Reeves continued. You're not responsible for representing your entire species. That's too much weight for anyone. But I want you to understand that your actions matter, not just to you, but to everyone who's watching. That's a lot to think about, ma'am. It is. Take your time with it. Reeves stood, picking up her coffee cup. One more thing. When you're cleared for duty, I want you to consider applying for the Advanced Tactical Program. It's an honor track, only the top 5% qualify, but I think you'd excel there. Mara's heart jumped. Yes, ma'am, I'd be honored. Good. Get yourself healed up, Cadet Chen. The galaxy needs you functional. She nodded once and walked away, her footsteps echoing on the metal deck. Mara sat alone with her coffee and watched the storm on Tarsus IV. The spiral had reached the western coast now, trailing rain across mountain ranges and forests she'd never seen. She thought about paths and possibilities, about the cadets who'd quit and the ones who'd stayed, about Commander Reeves breaking her arm and choosing to continue anyway. She thought about the calendar in her locker, 47 days marked off, 10 days left until final evaluations, then assignment, then a ship, then space, then everything. 3 weeks later, Mara stood on the same training mat where Instructor Vek'tar had broken her ribs. The gymnasium smelled familiar: iron and sweat, recycled air, the faint ozone tang of energy shields. The observation deck was full again, but this time the whispers were different, curious instead of worried, expectant instead of uncomfortable. Vek'tar's jaw had healed. The wires were gone, though he still moved it carefully, testing its range. He stood across from Mara in the same position he'd held before, but his posture had changed, more neutral, less predatory. Cadet Chen, he said, his voice clear again, thank you for volunteering for today's demonstration. She'd actually volunteered this time. Yes, sir. Today we will discuss countertactics for opponents with superior physical capabilities. He gestured toward her. Cadet Chen has proven that humans can endure significant trauma while maintaining combat effectiveness. Today, she will demonstrate how to leverage that endurance into offensive advantage. A ripple of interest moved through the observation deck. Mara spotted Jake and Yuki near the front, both grinning. Lissa stood beside them, her crystalline eyes reflecting the overhead lights. The key principle, Vek'tar continued, pacing slowly, is patience. Many species, including my own, rely on overwhelming force to end encounters quickly. We strike hard, expecting immediate capitulation. But if the opponent does not capitulate, if they absorb the damage and continue, we must recalculate. And recalculation takes time. He stopped in front of Mara. Time is a weapon. Pain is a timer. The question is, who runs out first? He tilted his head. Cadet Chen, show them what you showed me. Mara nodded. She'd rehearsed this, not the physical movements, but the explanation, the words she'd need to make it clear. When someone hits you, she said, projecting her voice toward the observation deck, your body wants you to run or fight back immediately. But if they're stronger than you, those instincts get you killed, so you have to do something else. Which is, Vek'tar prompted. You have to wait. She demonstrated her stance, feet shoulder-width apart, hands loose, weight centered. You take the hit, you process the information, you watch how they move, and when they're committed to the pattern, when they think they've won, you counter. Demonstrate, Vek'tar said. He moved like he had before, a controlled strike toward her shoulder. Mara didn't dodge. She let it land, felt the impact rattle through her bones, and watched his recovery. He pulled back, repositioned, struck again, this time toward her ribs. She absorbed it, turning slightly to deflect the worst of the force, and counted the seconds between blows. 1, 2, 3. On the fourth strike she moved, not away but in closing distance, disrupting his pattern. Her palm struck upward, not hard enough to hurt but fast enough to make him flinch. He stepped back, reassessing. Good, he said. Again, they repeated the sequence 5 times. Each time Mara endured 3 or 4 strikes, learning his rhythm, then countered. Each time her counter came faster. More precise, by the 5th repetition she was inside his guard before he'd finished his 3rd blow. Vek'tar stepped back and addressed the observation deck. Notice what she does. She does not block. Blocking wastes energy against superior strength. She does not retreat. Retreat prolongs the engagement. Instead, she accepts damage as tactical data. She trades pain for information, then uses that information to exploit weakness. He turned to Mara. This is not something most species can do. The pain would overwhelm their decision-making capacity. They would panic or shut down or die. His amber eyes met hers. Humans process pain differently, not because you are stronger, you are not, but because your pain does not paralyze you, it clarifies you. Mara felt something shift in her chest, recognition maybe, validation. Yes, sir, she said quietly. Do you understand now? Vek'tar asked. Why I pushed you as I did? You were testing a hypothesis. I was proving you to yourself. He smiled, teeth and all. You knew intellectually that you could endure, but knowing and experiencing are different things. I gave you experience, you gave yourself proof. The observation deck erupted in whispers again. Mara heard someone, maybe Jake, yelling encouragement. Yuki was definitely laughing. Even Lissa had her hands pressed together in what might have been applause. Vek'tar raised one clawed hand and the noise subsided. This concludes today's lesson. Dismissed. The cadets filed out, but several approached Mara on their way past. Quick nods, a few pats on the shoulder, one enthusiastic fist bump from Jake that nearly knocked her over. Yuki lingered, waiting until most of the crowd had thinned. That was incredible, she said, seriously. You just changed how everyone here thinks about combat dynamics. I just stood there and got hit, Mara pointed out. You just revolutionized endurance-based tactics, Yuki corrected. Don't undersell it. She glanced toward the exit where Jake was waiting. We're getting food, you coming? In a minute. I need to talk to Instructor Vek'tar first. Yuki nodded and jogged off. Mara turned to find Vek'tar watching her, his expression unreadable. Sir, she said, I wanted to thank you for breaking your ribs, for not holding back. She chose her words carefully. You could have gone easier, made the demonstration safer, but you didn't, and because you didn't, I learned something real. Vek'tar's eyes crinkled. You are welcome, Cadet Chen, though I suspect you would have learned the lesson regardless. Stubborn creatures, humans. I've heard that before. You will hear it again. He paused. Commander Reeves tells me you are applying for the Advanced Tactical Program. Yes, sir. Good, you will excel there. He gestured toward the exit. Go eat, heal completely. I expect to see you back here next week. For more demonstrations, for more lessons, his smile sharpened. I have many hypotheses left to test. Mara grinned despite herself. "I'll be ready, sir." She left the gymnasium and walked through the academy's corridors toward the commissary. Her ribs didn't hurt anymore, the regenerators had done their work, but she could still feel the ghost of them, the memory of pain that had taught her what she could survive. She thought about Vek'tar's words, "You gave yourself proof." In her locker, 47 days marked off, 10 left until evaluations. But the calendar didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like countdown, sure, but also like confirmation. She'd made it this far, she'd endured, she'd learned, she could make it the rest of the way. The commissary was crowded and loud, 100 conversations in a dozen languages, the clatter of trays, the hiss of food processors. Jake and Yuki had saved her a seat near the viewport, where Tarsus IV hung below them like a promise. She slid into the chair and accepted the tray Jake pushed toward her. "To Mara," Jake said, raising his water glass, "who headbutts instructors and lives to tell about it. To humans," Yuki added, raising hers, "who feel everything and choose anyway." Mara raised her own glass. "To making paths," they drank terrible water and ate mediocre food and laughed about nothing important. Outside the viewport, the planet turned slowly, carrying storms and cities and people who didn't know she existed. Above them, beyond the station's hull, the stars waited. Somewhere out there was her assignment. Her ship, her future, but here now she had this, friends, food, proof that she could endure anything the galaxy threw at her. That was enough. For now, it was more than enough. 6 months later, Ensign Mara Chen stood on the bridge of the Alliance cruiser Steadfast, watching the viewscreen display a debris field where a colony station used to be. Hostile forces. Civilian casualties. Standard rescue operation turned combat scenario. Ensign Captain Vorath, a towering Drexian with scars that told a dozen stories, gestured toward the tactical display. "Your assessment." Mara studied the layout, enemy positions, friendly forces, civilians trapped in the lower sectors. "High risk, high cost." Standard military calculus said wait for reinforcements. "We go in now," she said. "Before they reinforce their position." "That is aggressive," Vorath rumbled. "We will take damage." "Yes, sir, but damage we can absorb." She looked at him. "They're expecting us to wait, we don't." Vorath's expression, hard to read on a Drexian face, might have been approval. "You sound certain?" "I am, sir." He nodded once. "Helm, execute Ensign Chen's plan." The Steadfast surged forward. Mara felt the ship shudder as plasma rounds impacted the shields, felt the deck vibrate beneath her boots. She thought about a training mat, about endurance. About waiting for the right moment to strike. The operation took 40 minutes. They extracted 218 civilians, lost 17 crew members, took enough damage to put the ship in dock for a month, but they won. Later in the officers' mess, Captain Vorath sat across from her with his own terrible coffee. "You were right," he said, "about timing." "I learned from a good teacher," Mara replied. "Instructor Vek'tar, among others." She smiled. "Pain doesn't make decisions, we do." Vorath nodded slowly. "Humans," he said almost to himself, "fragile, emotional, stubborn beyond reason." He raised his cup in a slight salute. "The galaxy is fortunate to have you." Mara raised hers in return. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled past, infinite and cold and beautiful. She'd made it, through the academy. Through evaluations, through assignment. She'd made it to the place she'd dreamed about from that foster home roof all those years ago when the stars felt impossible and distant. And now she was here, scarred but whole, tested but unbroken, ready for whatever came next.